All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this live, sort of impromptu live setup today with my friends, Coach Bronson and Carnivore JT. Coach Bronson had this idea to address some of the weird stuff that's been happening lately, sort of with people dropping out of carnivore, people saying you have to go super lean carnivore, people saying you should add back in carbs or you'll die. So, Bronson, what were some of the things you were concerned about you wanted to talk about today?
Yeah, I think I'll just go over, I guess, really quick, just what I'm hoping to get out of this conversation. There's a lot of people making changes to their individual habits, the way that they do whatever they're doing nutrition wise. And there's a lot of emotion behind it that I'm hearing. There's a lot of people getting triggered. There's a lot of people taking offense. There's a lot of judgment. And this is not just on the influencer side or the content creator side. This is also in the community. People are being very dogmatic about the way that we're, the carnivore diet or the keto diet. And I just want to use this opportunity with the three of us talking to kind of say, look, this isn't about what any one person is doing in their life. This is more about how we're perceiving it and the things that we're doing based on what other people are doing. And I think there's a disconnect there. But then also clear up some of the confusion, because I know I think I've heard you mention this, Dr. Chafee. There's a lot of people who this has helped. This way of eating has helped and are now afraid of continuing it because of some of the things that they're hearing. And I want to address directly some of those scientific claims that are being used as the reason, as the justification for why people are making changes. And then finally, just really overall, just remind everybody that it doesn't matter what anybody else is doing. You have to focus on your results and what's working for you, right? No matter what anybody says, no matter what anybody does, none of it matters. Just because everybody loves JT or you or me, and they get their information from us, doesn't mean they have to try to do what we're doing, right? The three of us, we all do carnivore differently, right? And the things that we've seen and how we do stuff has helped us make our decisions for our lives. But I don't do anything because JT does it. I don't do anything because you do it. So just understanding that we have to take information, but it doesn't dictate what we do.
Yeah, and that's a thing that I've had a problem with. It's people eat whatever the hell they want. I've never cared about that. But when people are going around saying that if you don't include carbohydrates, you are going to hurt yourself, you are going to destroy your metabolism, you're going to destroy your thyroid, you're going to spike your cortisol and give yourself some sort of Cushingoid syndrome, even though ketogenic diets are used clinically in hospitals to treat Cushing's disease and other hypercortisol states, that I have a problem with, saying that will happen unequivocally, even though the vast majority of people have no idea what the hell they're talking about. They've never had any sort of issue. They've never had anything but positives. And there are, a few people that, feel that they need to add back in carbs for whatever reason. But, a lot of them are even saying that their cortisol is fine, their thyroid is fine. And so why are you saying that's going to destroy your cortisol and it's going to destroy your thyroid, when the evidence is against that? The literature is strictly against that for the long-term human data in ketogenic diets. And, it doesn't even pass the smell test. I mean, there's entire civilizations who've never eaten carbohydrates and they don't have any of those issues. And so scaring people, saying this is going to happen, and bastardizing the biochemistry, which pisses me off, because that's, my degrees in molecular and cellular biology and chemistry. And it's like these people going, they've never studied biochemistry. They've never taken OChem, and they going around saying, well, this is how this works. It's like, that dude's never even heard of that process until this morning. I mean, I see some of these people, like, I remember, JT, you did a video talking about gluconeogenesis. And, I commented on these posts talking about, they said, well, the body can make glucose out of protein from gluconeogenesis, and going off and talking about how this is a stress state. And of course it's not. Protein catabolism for gluconeogenesis is literally the last stage when you run out of all your fat and you run out of all other resources for gluconeogenesis and energy generation. That's when you start catabolizing your muscle and protein in a ketogenic state. And, you know, I pointed this stuff out and pointed out, you know, glycolysis pathway and these a number of other pathways. And instantly, like the next video they make, they're like, well, yes, there are these other pathways, but they're not the main pathways. It's like, dude, you just heard about this today in the comments and from JT's video. You never heard about this process before in your entire life, because every video you ever done before, you never mention any of these. You just say gluconeogenesis has to be done from protein and it has to come with high cortisol. It's just, it's so crazy. These people that have never heard of these things before, they literally heard about these processes that morning, like word a day toilet paper, and now they're going around talking as if they're like a professor in the field.
Yeah.
And saying that you're going to hurt yourself unequivocally. That's going to happen. That pisses me off.
Yeah,
and
that's definitely the part that's gotten me fired up as well.
Yeah.
What about you, JT? What have you been hearing?
I think the biggest one is just, and you touched on it with the dogmatic approach. I actually had a problem with the carnivore community when I first got in, because I kind of got it my feet wet animal based. But it was the other way around, right? It was like, you have to eat so strict carnivore, and if you include herbs or spices, that's not carnivore, and we're going to crucify you for it. And now we've kind of gone this opposite way, where it's like, well, it's still carnivore, but you include carbs, and you actually have to include carbs, otherwise you're going to have these adverse effects. And I honestly think it's being driven from a couple different places. One, I think there's content creators who are just no longer finding traction with carnivore, right? And I'm finding that myself, right? You know, had this kind of meteoric growth, and carnivore was popular, and everybody was talking about it, and then people became exposed to carnivore. They heard about carnivore, they've seen all the carnivore influencers, and then social media growth just kind of stagnated, right? It's been that way for the last 6 months, right? And as a content creator, I kind of get that, right? You're always trying to find what's the next big thing, what's, you know, going to hook people's attention. And yeah, you kind of run out of things to say when you talk about the same things over and over again. So I honestly think that's part of it. And I forget the guy's name that I just did the video on that Chafee you commented on. I honestly think that's where he's coming from, right? He wrote a book with Dr. Barry. He's speaking at Hack Your Health, which used to be KetoCon, right? He was like a 20-year keto guy. And now all of a sudden he's 60% carbohydrates, and you have to eat carbohydrates. What?
Yeah.
And that then leads into the other thing that I have an issue with, is people are speaking in these absolutes, right? There is no absolute, like, you are going to have this, you're going to have problems, you're going to get heart disease. And I thought we squelched that, right? Like, I did a video probably about a year ago on smoking. It was the study done out of Australia, where they followed people who smoked 30 plus cigarettes a day for 30 plus years, right? And they looked at their health outcomes. And as you can expect, they had bad health outcomes. But the number of people that actually had bad health outcomes was not 100%, right? Like, smoking causes cancer, right? Like, that's, if you ask anybody, they'd be like, yeah, of course it does. But it's not a guarantee that you're going to get cancer if you smoke, right? It's something like 95+% of lung cancer cases have smoking involved, either whether it was secondhand smoke or you smoked or whatever it was. And in an Australia study, it was something like 27% of the people that smoked 30 cigarettes a day got lung cancer. So you go, there's no absolutes in anything.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, maybe if you drink a bunch of uranium, that's probably going to be an absolute, right? Like, there's no absolutes in anything. And yet we talk about, we now have this approach where it's like, you have to eat carbs, you have to do this, you're going to spike this. And then somebody goes, well, it didn't happen to me. And they go, what do they say, right? Like, that's anecdotal. You're just citing a collection of anecdotal evidence that's literally no different. I think that's part of it. I think the Mark Bell situation highlighted the people just trying to find the new trend with the sugar diet. Like, you can't tell me there's anybody who actually took that seriously. Like, come on. Like, we're eating candy, and like, you're literally eating candy and highlighting that. You're like, I'm eating candy for breakfast. Sometimes I just have a spoonful of sugar. You're like,
so
Mary Poppins.
You just did something that ties to what you said earlier. That is really, I think, at the crux of why we're kind of pissed off. about this whole situation. I agree with you. I don't think many or most of the influencers or content creators that were pushing the sugar diet as a trend really bought into it. I think, like you said, it was a algorithm seeking activity.
Or paid.
People,
the sugar companies and the cereal companies and things like that. I mean, they've been pushing hard against.
Yeah, very potentially. Yeah.
But I'm going to cut I'm going to cut you off real quick, Bronson. I'm going to touch on what you said, JV. People are going to say, "Oh, it's conspiracy. That's conspiracy." No, there are dietitians, and I did a video on it. There's a dietitian who literally got paid by Monsanto, who is a Bayer company who makes Roundup, to say, "Oh, the glyphosate in your cereal is not that bad." That was literally her video with the tag "paid partnership from Bayer."
Yeah. So people don't think that. I mean, micro-influencing marketing is growth. Like, that is where things are happening right now from an industry perspective. But to what he was saying, I think the problem and why I'm upset or why I'm hot about this topic is because the content creators may not have bought into it, but the people listening did. The audience that all of these people have, the audience that we have, take what we say very seriously, and they make decisions based off of the information that we provide. And it is irresponsible, in my opinion, for what many of these influencers are doing, particularly on the sugar diet side. But then honestly, even in this space now with this trend, there is I think, an overuse of science to justify personal decisions, number one. And then number two, there is a lack of transparency in, I'm making this decision for whatever reason I'm making it, but then the message is everyone needs to make this decision too. And there isn't a communication of, hey, this is my personal decision. I'm sharing my story. And I've even seen some people say, I'm not telling you what you need to do. This is just my decision, what I'm doing. But then in the very same video, this is going to kill you. If you don't do this, you're going to be unhealthy. It's like, what? That's a mixed message there. And people are getting confused and scared. And, it drives me crazy.
Yeah. Well, to the point earlier about how this could be just, chasing clicks and things like that. Like you said, Zane did a book with Dr. Barry. And so, it's been at KetoCon and all these other sorts of things. But he said recently that he's never been keto and he's never done carnivore, that at any point, he's never done less than 100 to 150 grams of carbs a day. So he's never done keto, so he was profiteering off of this and trying to hop in on that hype so that he could, do something with that from whatever. I mean, he pushes, peptides and hormones and things like that, so it's like, so this is a lot of these things can be like a gimmick and a vehicle, just to try to push whatever product he's pushing, like the peptides. Here's a quick question. If his diet advice was so great, why does he need peptides? And why do his clients need peptides? I don't use peptides. I don't use hormones. My patients have doubled, even tripled their testosterone level. I've had 6 women come out of menopause in their 50s by just doing carnivore. So, why, if your advice is so great, do you need a whole bunch of drugs and peptides and steroids and things like that to affect, any sort of reasonable results, because carnivore actually does it a lot better than that. But, Zane's saying he's at, 65% carbs now, and he feels better. Well, of course he does, because when you're eating 100 grams of carbs, 150 grams of carbs, you're in sort of a no man's land. You're not eating low enough carb to be in ketosis, to generate your own blood sugar and your own ketones for energy, but you're not eating enough carbohydrates to actually satisfy your energy demands, especially if you're active and working out all the time, which Zane does. I mean, that's sort of has been his life for decades now. So sorry, go ahead.
That's another disparity in the conversation that I think there's not enough people that have practical experience working with the population that most of our audience is made of. And they're talking from it, is particularly when we talk about people that are like us. Like Zane is he's in his 50s, he's in shape, he's been in shape for years, and he's trying to explain things in a way, but the people that are listening are not in shape. The people that are listening are metabolic and unhealthy. The people that are listening are not exercising. They don't have the lean muscle mass. They're dealing with their different, completely different context. I have a question for both of you guys. This will be interesting to see. How do you guys eat now? What does your diet look like? How do you define carnivore? Because the one phrase that I see a lot in this recent content is, I was strict carnivore and ...
Yeah.
But I guarantee you, every single person saying it, their definition of strict carnivore looks different.
Yeah.
So what is
No,
what does it look like for you guys?
Well, I ask people that all the time, they say, well, I'm doing carnivore and I'm having this problem. It's like, okay, so what are you eating? They talk about all the different meat that they're eating. Okay, what else are you eating? Well, sometimes I'll have dairy, I'll have cheese, I'll have artificial sweeteners, I'll have like erythritol, and I'll have this and I'll have that, and there's a lot of other stuff. And so when you sort of peel back the layers, quite often there's a lot of different things that they have in there. And I said, okay, well, great. So cut all that stuff out and see what that does for you. A lot of times that really helps, whatever their issue is. A lot of times I've spoken to people where they've had they've said, well, unfortunately carnivore didn't work for me, and it really sucks because I felt so good with it. I had all this energy. I came off my blood pressure medications. This is a real story, actually. Came off my blood pressure medications, came off my autoimmune medication, put these things into remission, and it was great, but I just couldn't lose weight. So I guess it didn't work for me. And to me, I was like, well, that actually sounds like it was working pretty damn well. And then you ask them, it's like, okay, well, what exactly were you eating? And you have to say that, what exactly were you eating? And then that comes out, and she was having erythritol, she was having dairy, she was having those sorts of things. And it's just like, okay, well, those are ways to stall your weight loss, and that can be an issue. Also, there's hormonal issues and metabolic issues. I see patients that sometimes will take 6 months to 8 months before their hormones heal, their metabolism heals, their insulin resistance heals, their leptin resistance heals, and then their body's in a position that they can start losing weight. And then they do, and then they lose weight very healthily and rapidly. For me, I've been very consistent. I eat meat and water, fatty meat and water, and I try to get about 80% calories from fat. And I don't count calories or track them. I just eat as much fat as my body is capable of absorbing. So I get soft stools, but not loose stools. And so I know that my body's hit that saturation point for fat. And then 90% of the fat that I eat after that is going to go out in my stools and keep it soft. And so I haven't deviated because I haven't wanted to, because I feel so much better doing this. Anytime little bits of things slip in, I don't feel as good. And so it just doesn't interest me anymore. And I feel great, and my bloods are all great. I've sort of stopped bothering to check my blood work because it's always just been perfect. My thyroid has not dipped at all. If anything, it's gotten better. My testosterone is that of a 25-year-old. And all my nutrients and zinc, magnesium, B12, these are all above the normal reference range. And so people saying you can't get enough magnesium. I had a debate with a professor of nutrition in California a couple of weeks ago at a conference, and he was saying, you can't get enough magnesium. I was like, well, then why is my magnesium above the reference range? And that's what I see in my patients as well, because we're not eating anti-nutrients that block out magnesium. That's one thing. So it's a good point, because a lot of people have a different definition of what carnivore is. A lot of times they just think it's just they eat a lot more meat. But a big thing is it is an elimination diet in a way, because yes, you need the meat because that's good for you. That gives you all the nutrients you need. But it's really important to get rid of these other things that actually cause harm. And that's where a lot of people find the healing. People have changed their life. They've literally saved their life. And for people to come around saying that, oh, this is bad for you and this is going to kill you, even though they've literally reversed diseases that have never been reversed before. Yeah. It's just insulting.
What about you, JT? What's your definition?
So I think it's important to define carnivore, right? It's also important to understand that we're not vegans with it, right? And you can eat something that's not carnivore, and that's okay, right? Like, and it's exactly what Dr. Chafee said, is it's you figure out how you feel, right? And so I currently consider myself like, and I've used this term a couple times, like a cyclical carnivore, right? Where if I'm going out to an event or I'm going out to eat with family and friends, which I don't do very often, right? But I might not want to worry about trying to be strict, right? Or I might not worry about what it's cooked in or whatever it is. But I almost to a T know how I'm going to feel, right? And I don't feel bad. People will be like, well, if you can't eat carbs, I could literally eat 10 pounds of Halloween candy right now. And yeah, my stomach probably wouldn't feel good because I ate 10 pounds of Halloween candy, but I'd be fine, right? I wouldn't wake up with anything terrible the next day. I wouldn't, right? I might have some interesting bowel movements for a minute and then I'll be fine. I won't have crazy blood sugar. I'll be totally fine because I can do that. But what I found is like JP is just going back to carnivore, I just feel better. So why wouldn't I do that 90, 95, 99% of the time? And if I have an issue where I start to get off track, I know exactly what I have to do to get back on.
Bingo.
So I think the definition of carnivore is eat foods from animals, right? Like everybody handles dairy a little bit different. You'll get different opinions on people. I eat a fair amount of cheese. I love cheese. I don't have any issues with cheese. There are people that might have issues with cheese. But the starting place is if it comes from an animal, okay, we'll talk about it, right?
Yeah.
Like that's a good place to start. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Dr. Chafee, is people will do carnivore, but then act like these other things that they're adding in aren't an issue, right? Like my diet soda, or it doesn't have any calories, right? Or my spices or my herbs or whatever it is. And you'd be surprised once you actually cut all that stuff out, how that can be causing you issues. And you can kind of hit it on the head. I found it with like onions, right? Like I like onions. I don't have a problem with onions, but I know that if I eat onions, I feel just a little bit different and I can pinpoint to that. And so I think that's the important part of, yes, defining carnivore, but people need to at least try actual carnivore and give it a chance.
Yeah.
Right. Like you spent your entire life being reliant on carbohydrates for your fuel source, and you switch over in 2 weeks and you're like, yeah, I felt terrible. Well, no kidding, you felt terrible, right? Like you have a gas engine vehicle that you decided to put diesel in for a couple of weeks and you can't figure out why it doesn't run very well. It's going to take some time, right? There's a metabolic adaptation period. And I think, a lot of that is the society we're in. Part of it is the fact that we don't go longer than 2, 3, 4, 5 hours without eating, right? That's part of the problem. Yeah. Our body never has to figure out how to use anything for a fuel source other than what we shovel into our face. So you have all these things stacked up against you. And then people want to like, just, oh, well, I tried it. I had a couple of ribeyes and I just, it wasn't for me. Yeah, it's tough. I think the societal factor is one of the biggest hurdles to it. It's like alcohol, right? Like you're inundated with alcohol ads. You turn on the game, it's alcohol. You turn on this, it's alcohol. You go to a party, you're offered a drink. You go to a bar, you're offered a drink. You go to a restaurant, you're offered a drink. The difference is if you tell somebody, no, I'm not drinking, they go, oh yeah, good for you, man. Right? Like they don't go, nah, it's cool, just be an alcoholic.
Yeah.
But it's different with food, right? If you say, no, what's the first thing they say? What, are you on a diet? What? You don't need to lose weight. You're on a diet?
Yeah.
You got something wrong with you? Right? Like, so I think that is a barrier and people have a really hard time with that. But like you said, you have to actually go carnivore to see if it actually works. And that doesn't mean you have to do that for the rest of your life. It doesn't mean you have to be in deep ketosis for the rest of your life, right? Like that's the other thing is people are like long-term ketosis. Okay, then get out of it every 2 weeks.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
Wow,
Worried about it.
Or every day. It doesn't, whatever. Like you don't have to.
Yeah.
So
it's super easy.
Where in this conversation, because I'm like you guys, I look at this, I think part of the issue we're having with this whole situation is everybody trying to use a groupthink definition of carnivore instead of just looking at what is the concept. One of my favorite phrases is date protocols, marry principles, right? So carnivore, if you look at carnivore as a protocol, this is how you do this. Here's the guidelines. Here's the rules of carnivore. That only goes so far, and that only works for a small percentage of people. But if you say, what are the principles behind carnivore? Remove crap, focus on animal-based foods, right? Don't eat a lot of plant-based, foods, et cetera. Like, what are the principles? And then how can I take, here's a magic word, the minimum effective dose of that concept and apply it to my life? And that answer is going to be different for every single person. What is the minimum change that I can make to see progress towards whatever goal I have following this concept of animal-based whole foods nutrition? And if we can look at it from that perspective, we get everything in this whole conversation goes away. It goes away. It's no longer an issue because now everybody's defining what works for them based off of the principles of why carnivore works, instead of trying to follow some arbitrary groupthink guideline.
Yeah.
I think you hit it on the head with the removing, right? Too many people are focused on what do I eat? How much organs do I have to eat? No, just stop eating the other stuff. Right? That's step one. Stop eating that stuff. And then you find out that it just happens, right? Like you don't have to eat a ton of organ meats. You don't have to be super specific with your electrolytes, with, this little bit, that little bit, taking magnesium supplements, whatever it is. Like now, if you start to run into issues, we can look at it and you can start adding that kind of stuff in. But when people start, just do the process of elimination, eliminate that stuff. And then you will learn so much more than being like, hey, I just wasn't feeling good. I probably should have had more organs, when in reality, it was all the artificial sweeteners that you were eating.
Yeah. And the thing is too, I think it's also important that when someone is having a problem and you want to reassess, it is really simple. It's like you're saying, just remove these things. Like what else is in there? That's not just animal, meat and water and things like that. If you're worried about weight loss, or you have inflammation, autoimmunity, or something like that, even dairy can be a problem. So you just cut it out. You do 30 days of just meat and water, and you just see what happens. You add some things back in. Say, okay, eggs are fine, dairy's fine, great. And then you find this other thing that was not fine. But the minimum effective dose. It's important to point out too that for some people that's almost everything. Like people with autoimmune issues. I have patients that really suffer if they eat anything except beef and water. Just anything. I mean, they have a pork chop and they're having bloody diarrhea for 3 days. So it's so they can't even eat non-ruminant meat. They're so sensitive to these sorts of things. So I think that it does give you a lot to just try that of just pure meat and water, high fat meat and water for 30 days, and then say, okay, well, can I add something back in? I mean, I care nothing about what other people eat what they decide to do with their lives. This is just trying to give people tools and guidelines, like we said. Just say, hey, look, this is something that these are the principles. We need meat. These are essential nutrients that we have to have, and these other things can cause harm. And to some people, they can cause a lot of harm. And so just keep that in mind, and then and do with that as you will. For me, I don't have any serious autoimmune issues. I've never had diabetes or anything else, but I just feel so much better without any of that stuff. And so I like feeling like that. I like feeling
good. So I'm going to do what makes me feel good, right? Yeah, absolutely.
That's it.
Yeah.
And
now,
so, yeah.
That goes to one of the things.
Don't do that because I feel good when I do cocaine. So I should do cocaine, right?
There's a point.
Somebody's going to cut that out and be like, Carnivore JT does cocaine.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, you actually highlight what I was just going to say, JT, and that is not only is how we implement our nutrition different individual by each person, but each person's goals are different. So one of the common threads that I'm seeing in a lot of this content that's out coming lately is, there's a stall, there's a plateau, I wasn't reaching my goals. There's a lot of vagary around what wasn't happening for people, which is why they decided to make a change. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on making changes to go to a completely different paradigm of nutrition versus making changes within the existing paradigm. Right. So there's this idea that, well, I was carnivore or keto and I wasn't reaching my goals, so I had to add carbs. Well, what about making a change within carnivore? If we're going to, for sake of conversation, we're going to work within the box of some arbitrary definition of keto carnivore. If keto carnivore, the way you were implementing it wasn't working, why did you then need to completely go to a completely different paradigm to then see something work? What happened to tweaking within the existing concepts that you already had, right? Maybe you needed to stop doing intermittent fasting. Maybe you needed to stop doing OMAD. Maybe you needed to actually eat more food. Maybe you needed to stop trying to be in ketosis 24/7 a day. So 24/7, like there's a whole bunch of things within the context of what we're doing in the carnivore, keto concepts that could be done without having to completely throw it to the side. But for some reason, it shouldn't be hard. And this is the argument I'm seeing. It shouldn't be difficult or challenging or complex in order to find the nutrition that works for you. It's just easier to use carbs. That's the argument that I'm seeing.
Yeah, well, and yeah, I mean, the argument flip flops. I've been trying to nail some of these people down because they're making definitive statements in their videos saying this will happen. This is how gluconeogenesis works. This will cause high cortisol. This will cause thyroid dysfunction. And you just point out, well, there's millions of people that don't do that. And the clinical trials in humans, the long-term human data shows that no, that doesn't happen. And then they'll just flip-flop and, oh, you're denying people their truth. I'm like, I never said that. You're denying people's truth because there's millions of people, millions of more people that are saving their lives by doing this. And they get so defensive of carbohydrates. Like, what do you care? It's not your mother. Like, what is going on that you don't say that about carbs. It's just like, trying to make and literally just lying and making things up. Saying that there's one statement that said where it said, well, when you have glucose and ketones available, your body chooses glucose over the ketone. So that's a preference. Like, it's literally the opposite. And just Google it. Everybody here, Google that. It's literally the opposite. Yeah. Any biochemistry textbook can tell you that. Or that there was no chronic disease 100 years ago. You out of your damn mind? What are you talking about? Diabetes was described in ancient Egypt 2,200 years ago, in the 2nd century BC. What the hell are you talking about? The Ebers Papyrus in ancient Egypt 3,500 years ago describes a disease process similar to diabetes with copious amounts of urination, describes the symptoms that people get before they drop dead of a heart attack, describes what we would now call Alzheimer's. So what on earth are you talking about that chronic disease didn't exist before 100 years ago? Well, the obesity rate was only 1.3%. And the obesity rate's not high in India. They have a 25% diabetes rate in some studies. I was
just going to say, yeah. I mean, obesity isn't the end all be all of chronic.
No, it's not the driving factor for a disease. It is a symptom. It is not the cause of these diseases. We have used ketogenic. So they say that everything's seed oils. Like no one on this side of the camp anyway is saying that seed oils are not bad for you. It's just, we're not saying that it's the only thing that's bad for you, that there are a lot of things that are bad for you. In fact, most things, there are an unlimited amount of things that are bad for you. There are only a very limited few things that are good for you and safe for you to eat. So just because seed oils are bad for you doesn't mean that carbohydrates are good for you. Ooh. That's not the same thing. Yep. And they're saying, no, it's only seed oils. That's what causes diabetes. Well, that's funny. Because again, we've had diabetes for thousands of years, and the treatment for diabetes for 150 years before seed oils even existed on this earth, the highly refined processed industrial seed oils, was a ketogenic diet.
Yeah, I mean, Banting and Salisbury both. Yeah, Banting and Salisbury both reversed all sorts of issues, and that was 40, 50 years before seed oils even became a thing.
Well, late 1700s is when ketogenic diets first started getting used for diabetes. And that was used all throughout the 1800s. I have a textbook from Sir William Osler, who was the first professor of medicine at Johns Hopkins. He was knighted for his work in medical education. He's considered one of the best medical educators in history. I have his textbook from 1910. It was my great-grandfather's. There's a chapter on diabetes. Do you know what the treatment is on that? From Johns Hopkins, for the head professor at Johns Hopkins? A ketogenic diet. You eliminate carbohydrates and you have basically equal grams of protein and fats. And that was the only thing that they knew that could save their lives. That was the only thing that could reverse the diabetes and could stop. And back then they didn't have blood sugar monitors. It literally reversed the polyuria, polydipsia, and the death that came as a consequence of diabetes. And so, and that was with type 1 and type 2. They didn't really differentiate. So people that the younger presentations, that has a higher mortality, that has a very high mortality rate.
Right.
But what is that word? Very high, not absolute. So even type 1 diabetics were not dying necessarily from that treatment intervention. And they were living 7, 8, 9 months to a year regularly, according to that textbook, on a ketogenic diet without insulin.
Yeah.
How is that? And so and then the type 2 diabetics and things like that, they were just reversing this completely, and then they didn't have a problem. So if carbohydrates are not a part of this and seed oils are the cause of it, how is this happening before seed oils exist? And how does therapeutic carbohydrate restriction cure it and keep these people alive? I mean, this is just simple stuff that these people are just lying about and making up. And unfortunately, people don't know enough about the history to spot the bullshit, unfortunately. And so people can speak very confidently about things that they have no idea about, and they're just making up. And people buy it, unfortunately, which is why it's so important to call out the bullshit.
Yeah. JT, how do you handle tweaks within carnivore based on a goal? And this is part of the question, right? So if the goal is just weight loss, then it's a lot easier to manage all sorts of different changes and adjustments. But when we're talking about a general scope, we talk about, oh, I've got a thyroid issue, I've got this issue, I've got that issue, my cortisol, my whatever. Does it require, well, now I need to completely abandon this whole paradigm and go to something different? Or is there ways to do things within that?
Well, I love analogies, right? So it would be like somebody who's like, I want to build muscle. So I've decided to stop weight training, and I'm just going to do a bunch of cardio because the program I'm using doesn't work, right? I'm not gaining muscle. So I'm just going to start doing the treadmill and hope I can build muscle. How would you do that, right? So I think part of it also is people need to have a realistic understanding of what they're trying to accomplish. And people will go, well, I want to lose weight. And you're like, okay, why? Why do you want to lose weight? You're like, well, because I want to get down to X number, 120 pounds, or I want to get down to 170 pounds. Okay, why? Well, I don't know. I'm like, what if that is not your healthy weight? Right. And I think that is part of it. I don't necessarily think carnivore is the best weight loss diet, right? I think you definitely can use it for that. But I think carnivore helps you get to a weight that your body wants to be at, right? And I use the term homeostasis all the time. I think everybody has weight, and some of it's going to be a little bit higher, right? Some people are going to have just naturally their body wants to hold on a little more body fat percentage. Women especially. Like that's very biological in nature, right? And so the problem is you have people who are like, well, but I want to be leaner. I'm like, okay, well, if you want to get beyond a level that your body physiologically wants to stay at, then you have to do stuff that might be different, right? Which means strict carnivore or just intuitive eating might not work, right? Because all of that is designed to get your body functioning how it's supposed to. There's people like me. I am naturally lean, right? And people are going to be like, oh my God, I hate you. It's really easy for me to stay lean. That's just the way my body is. It always has been. The flip side to that is it's a lot harder for me to bulk up, right? So I have to, really, 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 really try to do that, where some people can bulk up super easy. There's a flip-flop to it. So when people, if they first just address it from a health standpoint, like I need to get healthier, and then they need to find what about it is it's healthier. And a lot of times it has to do with some sort of insulin resistance or some sort of lack of glucose control. And then they can start addressing it from there. And then they can do their tweaks within it, right? And they can figure that out. And then people just need to understand where they're at. Depends on your metabolic damage, right? People love to tell you type 2 diabetes is not reversible. Well, it is if your beta cells are not so far gone that they can no longer produce insulin.
But then you're not type 2 anymore, right? Now you're
exactly. There's varying spectrums. You can repair those where they get back to normal function, in which case it absolutely is reversible. There are people, however, who have done so much damage that they no longer can reverse that. Now they just have to manage it. right? So people need to understand where they're at. If you have serious autoimmune, like you touched on, Dr. Chafee, they can't go off of ruminant meat because they have such issues that they're trying to overcome. So that you have to be realistic with yourself. You're like, what exactly am I trying to overcome? If I have this list of autoimmune diseases, I have 10 medications I'm trying to get off of, blood pressure medication, insulin, I hate to break it to you, you're going to have to be stricter than I have to. That's just the facts of it.
Yeah.
Is it fair? Maybe not, but that's the realistically what we have to deal with it. So I think those are your tweaks. I can have much greater tweaks. I can try adding a whole bunch of carbs in if I want, because I have really good metabolic flexibility and I have really good insulin sensitivity. I understand where I'm at. I also understand that when I just go off the rails and just, like on some of my experiments, a bunch of stuff starts to creep back in.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay.
And I like you called out because of where you're at, right? When you're healthy, when you're the three of us, we can tolerate a different profile of our nutrition intake than someone who's unhealthy. So, and this is another reason why nobody should be doing what we're doing if they're not even close to where we are metabolically, right? We all work out. We all have a good amount of muscle. We all have good insulin sensitivity. We have good markers. Everything is fairly good with us. If I want to have French fries, I can do that. Like you said, you could eat 10 pounds of candy and it's not going to throw you completely for a loop, because we're at a different point metabolically. So the impact on those types of things as what our body can tolerate and manage is different. That doesn't mean because I can tolerate it, I should do it. And that's where I think, one of the reasonings behind, and this is not where I was planning on going, but I feel like I want to say it. One of the reasonings that I hear on why we should be doing carbs or reintroducing plants or whatever it may be is because we need to maintain metabolic flexibility in what we can eat, right? If you eat asparagus and you get sick, then that's because your body is fragile and you should be able to process whatever you put into your face. And I don't understand the logic there. Number one, if I'm having a toxic response to something I'm putting in my body, that doesn't mean I'm fragile. That means what I'm putting in my body is harming me. Number one. Number two, that's not what metabolic flexibility is. I keep hearing this term metabolic flexibility or the, flexing as applied to a digestive process, not a bioenergetic process. And it drives me absolutely crazy. Being able to digest plants or carbs is not metabolic flexibility. Metabolic flexibility, for everybody listening, is your body's ability to produce and utilize its own energy sources and transfer back and forth between what is needed based on activity. And the only things you need to do that is fat and protein. Introducing any type of carbs into your diet by definition, reduces metabolic flexibility, because you then become dependent on the carb intake and you stop using what your body has internally. So that's one of those types of things. It's like you said, Dr. Chafee, using terms and making claims about things that they just don't have any understanding of how it actually works.
Yeah, we're just making it up. They try to dance around these things and say, well, insulin resistance and seed oil. Yeah, okay, look, that's a straw man. Or red herring, if you will. Like, that's not the whole story here. Just getting glucose spikes, even if your blood sugar is down at 82 in an hour and a half, it doesn't matter. You have that spike. That's an area under the curve of glycation damage. High blood sugar will damage your body. It's called glycation. It's a non-enzymatic fusion of carbohydrate molecules with every other molecule in your entire body. And this is going through your bloodstream and it's damaging everything in your bloodstream. It's damaging your cholesterol, causing it to drop at ApoB100. So your liver can't recognize it. It's floating around. It gets picked up by macrophages. You get these foam cells and you get a lot of SD, LDL. It damages your hemoglobin. You get HbA1c. This is an advanced glycation end product, AGE, of glucose and hemoglobin. Okay, so we can measure how much damage is happening in our body at any given time. It also damages the vessel walls themselves, leading to atherosclerosis and heart disease. There's a 1,000% increased risk association when you have diabetes and heart disease, right? That's up there with smoking. And so this is why you get damage to the vessels. And this is what causes all sorts of damage throughout the body. It damages your kidneys. It damages your eyes. The number one cause of kidney failure is diabetes. Number one cause of adult onset blindness is diabetes. Number one cause of having your feet amputated is diabetes, right? So you get end organ damage from the glycation damage of your vessels. And this can overwhelm your body. Now, this is not necessarily going to happen in a day or two or a year or 5, but over decades, this can and will cause harm. The diet that they're talking about of whole food, 65% carbohydrate, or even 50% carbohydrate, or 40% carbohydrates, and then some veggies and some meat or lean meat or whatever. That was the diet that I was raised on. We never had processed foods. We had Cheerios for breakfast. That was as processed as it get. Every single meal that we had besides breakfast cereal was prepared from scratch.
Homemade prepared.
Yeah, exactly. My mom didn't have anything out of a box. She didn't even eat cereal. That same diet is what gave my mom diabetes. That diet.
Yeah.
And that
how do you guys?
A lot of people diseases that they're now reversing by coming off of this stuff. And so the exact diet these guys are saying, this is the optimal diet. That's been the recommendation for decades, and that's what's gotten people here. Yes, processed foods are worse than that, but that doesn't mean that these are good. Since agriculture, within generations, we shrank by 5-6 inches. Our jaws became smaller. Our teeth became crooked. We have signs of metabolic disease and chronic disease and infectious disease. And our brain shrank by 11% in men and 17% in women. That happened within generations, not within centuries or millennia. So this wasn't a slow, insidious process. That happened, bam. And we saw that with the Native Americans within generations after the buffalo were wiped out. There's a study called Tallest in the World in 2001 where they looked at original source data from the late 1800s. And they found that the Plains Indians, especially like the Cheyenne Indians, were the tallest human beings alive on Earth at the time. But the really interesting part of that is that the young men were the shortest of the entire tribe. The fathers were taller and the grandfathers were the tallest. And they said, if we did this study 100 years ago, people would be way over 6 feet on average. And that is really important because when that data was collected in the late 1800s, it was after the bison were wiped out and they were put on reservations and put on a Western diet. So you saw that immediately happening. That's long before processed food. That's long before seed oils got into the mix. That's long before even in refined sugar even became that prevalent. That is just from a standard Western diet, exactly what they're talking about. And it's so obviously harmful. JT, you're talking about what you look for. I look for what I tell people is like, this is about health. It's not about weight loss. There are quick ways to lose weight. Chop your leg off. It's probably the quickest way you can lose weight. It's not about losing weight. It's about improving your health and improving your body composition. And your weight on the scale does not tell you about either of those. And so you can put on muscle and lose fat and your weight will stay the same.
Yeah.
And yes, there are quicker ways of losing weight. The people are doing this crash diets of cutting fat and giving themselves protein poisoning. One of the symptoms of protein poisoning is rapid weight loss because you're dying. Okay. So that's not an effective method if you want to remain healthy. So I think the carnivore diet may not be the quickest way. It's damn quick for a lot of people, but for some people it takes a bit longer. But it is the safest way because you're nourishing yourself and you're giving yourself everything that your body needs, and then your metabolism is healing. And then when your metabolism and your hormones normalize, then you start losing weight quite readily and safely. And it's something that you can do for the rest of your life because you don't have to change it because you're doing something that's making you sick. You can just do this now. You can do this in 50 years. And that's really important.
Yeah. You mentioned a couple of things there as far as health. Because in this conversation, there's a lot of talk about various markers, my thyroid levels, my cortisol, my A1C, et cetera, being used as part of this justification for starting to add carbs. Somehow carbs improves A1C. Somehow carbs improve all of these different things. And there are mechanisms that can be looked at and identified where there are changes that improve the marker. But where do we look at the marker versus health? Because they don't always match up.
No, well, I mean,
Right.
in medicine, you say you do not treat lab tests, you treat patients. And so it doesn't matter what the lab test is if the clinical picture is very different. If I have someone who comes in and their underarm temperature is perfect, your morning temperature is perfect, their heart rate's perfect, they have their metabolism is perfect, they're able to keep a lean body mass, they're not cold sensitive, they're not intolerant to cold, they're not having brittle hair, dry skin, and nail changes and proximal muscle weakness and things like that. But then I see that their thyroid is slightly below the optimal range. I'm not jumping out of my chair, but if someone is in an optimal range and they have those symptoms, then I'm actually going to do something about it. It doesn't matter what the blood test says. I'm worried about my patient.
Yeah. And that's what I'm seeing. A lot of people looking at, I have to make a change because my marker, right? I mean, I had a couple of years. I mean, I've been following an animal-based whole foods, let's say carnivore diet for almost 8 years now. And I had a couple of years where my A1C was at least a 5.6, if not a 5.8 for a few years. And I didn't really care. Right. Everything else is fine. I'm still gaining muscle. My sleep is good. My energy is good. I've got no, my HDL to trig ratio is good. My HOMA-IR is good. Everything is fine, but I'm running pre-diabetic. Right. And oh my God, you're going to die. It's going to kill you. Right. Well, is it really though? I have no symptoms. I have no impact on my life. There's nothing else that is indicating that there's a problem, and then you learn more, and we'll talk about this, I think, because I want to ask you guys about this, but, making changes, going back to the discussion of if I were to say, hey, I need to do something to get my A1C in line, going to the extreme of completely changing everything that I'm doing, or maybe, here's the question, maybe it's not my nutrition. Maybe it's not what I'm eating, but it's when I'm eating, how much I'm eating. Am I doing things to increase my lean mass and improve my physical capacity? Am I getting good sleep? Do I have good stress management practices? Right? How much of the problems that people are having health-wise following a keto carnivore diet have nothing to do with their food?
Well, I mean,
I see this all the time. Overtraining is the biggest one.
Yeah.
Right. I get people all the time who are like, my cortisol is high. Well, number one, is your cortisol really high? How often are you getting a cortisol test?
And how are you testing it? Because that's super inaccurate to test. The only accurate way to test it is a 24-hour urine sample. And so you have to basically get a jug and urinate in that for the next 24 hours. Yeah. No one does that. And so you have to take those readings with a grain of salt.
Yeah. So anybody saying that one of the problems they're having on carnivore is that their cortisol is high all the time, I would put money that they have no idea what their cortisol actually is. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Now, if you're stressed all the time and you're having trouble recovering because you're doing high intensity training 3 or 4 days a week, you're walking 10, 15, 20,000 steps a day, you're not getting good sleep because you have horrible sleep habits or whatever it may be, or you're OMAD or you're intermittent fasting or you're extended fasting 3 days every other week. There's a whole bunch of other things that go into the process that completely messes up hormones, digestion, cortisol, all of these things that have nothing to do with the diet you've chosen to follow. Right? Is that something that you see, JT? People having a bunch of other issues that have nothing to do with their food?
So there can be that, but there's also, we have this obsession with adherence to the reference range. Right. So here's the problem with your HbA1c is it's dependent on the lifespan of your red blood cells. So if your red blood cells live longer, you have more of them, it's measured higher. Right. And again, people love to go be like, well, what background do you have or what? Even Dr. Shafee, they're like, oh, you're a doctor, but you're not that. Right. 90% of my information when it comes to insulin and glucose comes from Dr. Ben Bickman, who is a metabolic scientist. And I love that you use the word bioenergetics because his PhD is in bioenergetics, right? Like his entire practice is about cells and energy, right? And you use the term metabolic flexibility. Part of it with HbA1c is we're so focused on glucose, right? My glucose can be kind of all over the place, right? Like it can spike, it can be super low, it can be super high. it's not the whole story, right? And just because you have good glucose does not mean that you're healthy. People will do that too. They're like, oh, my HbA1c is 5, it's 4.8. Cool, your insulin's 10.
Yeah.
Which is also another ridiculous thing because reference range goes up to like 15. I'm sorry, but if you come in with a fasting insulin of 15, that's not okay, right? No. You are on the track to something.
Oh, and reference ranges change over the decades. Like we see that with cholesterol all the time. Cholesterol keeps getting lower and lower.
They change.
And lower and lower.
They change from lab to lab.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are certain agreed upon standards. So like for cholesterol and things like that, they say, hey, this is what we're looking for. Almost everything else is an average for that lab. So people don't understand this. And I found out about this in medical school. I was blown away. And then I started looking, and there's actually research that says, hey, what's an optimal reference range? All the other reference ranges are just an average. So you in whatever town that you're in, you can go to all the labs in that town, and you can go, they will all have different reference ranges. Why is that? Because every few years when they renorm their ranges, the first few thousand people that walk in the door as clients basically coming in to get a blood test because their doctor sent them in because they are sick, so not a healthy population sample, that becomes the reference range. That becomes the average. And so right here in Perth, where I'm at, I have patients and they'll come in and they're like, they get a blood test and they're normal in one place and too high in another. I'm like, well, which one is it? You know, and if you're a doctor and you're sending someone in and they say like, oh, wow, you're out of the range. Oh my gosh, we need to do something about this. But with that same number, if they went to another lab, just luck of the draw, they happen to go to another lab and it's normal, or maybe it's low. You know, so what is it? That's not useful information for a doctor or a patient to use to alter their behavior. You know, and say, okay, well, I need to do something about this, or maybe I don't. So all labs are completely off. So in the labs here, JT, the insulin is okay under 20. Right. And that's just because that's that average. It's just like, there's a shitload of people that go up to 20. I'm sure it's fine. And it's not fine. You know, I mean, you go to another lab and it's completely different. And so how, as a doctor or how as a patient, are you supposed to, you know, guide someone and guide yourself? If you're basing this off of lab tests that have arbitrary reference ranges, we look at these reference ranges as if they are gospel. This is where you need to be. You need to be in this reference range. This is the ideal reference range, but that's not even how they're advertised. They are said specifically, this is just an average of every Joe Schmo that walked through the door, and 93% of people are considered metabolically unwell. 70% of people in America and Australia are overweight or obese. And most people get sent in for lab tests because they're unwell. Most people are not doing a well baby check. So you're looking at the sickest of a sick population. Also, 80% of calories consumed in America and Australia and Europe are actually plant-based. And so if the working definition of a hyper carnivore is any animal that eats above 70% of its calories from animal sources, then Americans, Australians, and Europeans are all hyper vegetarians. Okay, so we're looking at an average of a sick vegetarian population. Please tell me that you don't trust your B12 readings, right? I mean, it's just like this is an average of sick vegans. And you're going to tell me that your B12 is fine if it's in that range? The hell it is. You need to be like double that in some cases.
I think thyroid is one of the big ones when it comes to this. It's probably the number one at the top of the list markers that I hear people say we have to have carbs because carbs stimulate insulin and insulin helps keep T3 high within range. Two things to that. Number one, I think we don't have any data that I'm aware of. You guys might know that I haven't seen any data that shows that lower T3 on carnivore is harmful. No. I know tons of people. My T3 went down, but I have no symptoms. Like you said, I have none of the traditional symptoms of having low thyroid hormone. But because the marker is low, for some reason, I need to fix it. Right. And then carbs are the way to do that because the problem is low insulin. Well, and this goes to the crux, I think, of really this discussion of the scientific justification for making this change. For those people that have been following carnivore, been following an animal-based whole foods diet, who say, now I need carbs all of a sudden. Somehow, for the past X number of years, carbs are not essential. I don't need them to. Now all of a sudden I need them to live. And that is using carbs based off of specific mechanisms without looking at how food choices and nutrition in the animal-based whole food paradigm can do the same thing. Right. So for example, with thyroid, well, you need insulin in order to do that. Well, okay, if I'm not chasing ketones and I'm eating a carnivore diet and I'm getting enough protein and fat in each meal, guess what's going to happen? I'm going to break ketosis and I'm going to have an insulin response. And that insulin response isn't going to be a spike, which is more harmful because of carbs. It's going to be moderate and longer. So the area under the curve will be about the same, but it will be more managed. It will be less of a shock to the system. So I can get the same insulin response within the carnivore bubble without having carbs. So I don't need carbs. And that's where I think some of this confusion, where again, some of the solutions may not even be food-based or nutrition-based. Some of the solutions may be, hey, you need to not work out 6 days a week and you need to take 2 days of rest. If you were worried about your cortisol, maybe you should focus on recovery. More is not better, right? There's a lot of these things that we're looking at. Carbs are an easier fix because of a mechanism that does X, Y, or Z, but is it a holistic, quality of life, long-term sustainable option? Because remember, when you're introducing carbs, as we've discussed for the past almost hour, you're introducing a fix based off of a mechanism, but you're also introducing potentially a whole bunch of other downstream problems. So what's the end goal? What are you really trying to do here?
Well, the funny thing about cortisol is the number one reason people are going to have high cortisol is if they're going to restrict their calories. Right? Guess what calorie restriction does? It raises your cortisol. So if you do that, and a lot of times people undereat on carnivore, and that's like, this sounds counterintuitive, but you just feel full. Right. And then you just don't eat. And chronic undereating can have a whole bunch of issues, which you alluded to earlier, is, are you eating enough? Right. Because that's something that in this day and age, who thinks of that? Like, who thinks, aside from a socioeconomic status, who thinks, am I actually eating enough? Right. It's almost overconsumption. It's very rarely underconsumption.
Yeah. And that's back to the who's actually testing their cortisol. How many people who are saying that they're stuck because they can't lose weight have even any idea what they're actually eating? Are you tracking your calories? Do you know what because I can guarantee you, in my experience, hundreds of clients over the past several years, everyone thinks they're doing one thing until they start tracking, and then they realize they're doing something completely different. Right? Oh, I'm doing exercise. I'm doing resistance training. Okay, start logging your workouts and then show me what you're doing. Right? And they're not even anywhere near doing anything to develop muscle. They're not doing anything near anything to actually have a good amount of protein. Oh, I'm eating plenty of protein. We'll track it. Okay, well, I'm getting 70 grams of protein a day. That's not enough. Right? Oh, I'm not restricting my fat. Oh, I'm getting 50 grams of fat a day. That's not enough. There's a whole bunch of things that I think claims are being made about what is happening, and nobody's really being transparent about what they're actually doing, because I think many people don't know because they're not tracking. Everything's intuitive. Everything is, I'm working out, so I must be doing this. And what's the actual evidence of that? And how are you making a change if you don't know what you're actually doing to begin with?
Yeah. So I was going to say, you guys want to know two pretty solid pieces of physiological proof that we don't need carbs. In fact, we didn't evolve on them, but we don't need them or want them. You were talking about insulin. How when you have when you eat protein, you have this longer curve with protein, and then so your blood sugar is actually quite well controlled when you have that. It's this very, very controlled, moderate rise in insulin that lasts several hours and then it comes down. But when you eat carbohydrates, you have a big jump in your insulin And then but that doesn't match the blood sugar spike from carbohydrates. Your blood sugar goes up, insulin comes up. Now your blood sugar goes down too much and you get reactive hypoglycemia. That's the medical term. And then your blood sugar actually goes too low. And now you have to go and chase carbs. You have to sort of catch up on carbs. And then you're sort of playing this whole game trying to match your insulin, carb, and blood sugar levels, right?
Yep.
So that doesn't really match. And interestingly, when you have type 1 diabetics who start going ketogenic and carnivore and things like that, and they're not using carbohydrates, we had to reinvent insulin. Insulin exists. Why do we need Act Rapid, Nova Rapid, Lantus, things like that? These are different forms of insulin that can match different curves, because just normal old insulin wasn't cutting the mustard and wasn't working properly for what people were eating. And so you have to use Act Rapid that can match that big spike and then go away, so that you don't have this big massive drop on your blood sugar and things like that. So it'll match your carb spike. But guess what type 1 diabetics who are just eating protein and fat have to do? They have to use the original insulin, just our insulin, just normal old insulin. And that perfectly matches their protein spike and their protein curve, not the carb curve. So our natural insulin is designed for protein, not for carbohydrates. So that's issue one. Number two, your oral health is a window to your overall health, especially your cardiovascular health. People that have worse dentition typically have worse cardiovascular disease and all sorts of other problems and things like that. If you're eating something that rots your teeth, by definition, that is the wrong thing. That is not your natural diet, because in the wild, there are no dentists. There are no toothbrushes. There is no Listerine. And so if your mouth doesn't take care of itself, you'll lose your teeth, you'll lose the ability to eat, and you will die. So if you are eating something that causes cavities and rots your teeth to the point that you will lose them, that by definition is the wrong thing and will probably cause problems inside your body as well. But that's the canary in the coal mine.
Mm-hmm.
Which bacteria is promoted when you eat carbohydrates? The bacteria that cause cavities. So carbohydrates will promote the bacteria, the wrong bacteria that rot your teeth, cause cavities, and make you lose your teeth. So by definition, cannot be our natural diet, cannot be our optimal diet, because we would die in the wild if that were what we were resorting to. And that's exactly what we see in the fossil record immediately after agriculture. Pre-agriculture, perfect, beautiful teeth, perfect dental arches, no cavities, no anything. Immediately after agriculture, smaller jaws, crooked teeth, rotten, decayed, missing, problematic dentition, and very serious health results as a consequence of that. So that's all you need to know about carbs and whether they're good for you or not.
Yeah. Have you ever had Kevin Stock on your podcast?
Yeah. He was one of my early guests.
That's all the stuff, because he's dentistry and all kinds of good stuff there. Okay, there's an elephant in the room that I think we need to discuss. And that is, there's a specific demographic that is not represented in this roundtable. Okay, we are not women. We are not in our 40s, 50s, and 60s.
You don't know how we identify, Bronson. So check the privilege. All right.
So one of the things that I've noticed, and I was thinking about this morning, in the space, I can't think of a single male influencer or content creator that has had this discussion, that has been talking about changing. Every one that I can think of that was keto carnivore and is now introducing carbs to some perspective, unless there's everybody let me know, unless there's someone I'm missing, it's all women.
I think Dr. Kiltz recently has started adding some things back in.
He actually did a live yesterday where he talked about how he is still carnivore. He's introduced some fish, and he had a potato a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
Right. So he's like, the biggest change I've made is that I started eating salmon. That was the biggest change he's made. So he came out yesterday and did a video and basically said, no, I am still following an animal-based whole foods diet. I'm not jumping ship. Carbs are not essential. Is him and Bart K did a live yesterday for about an hour.
Wow.
So
Cool.
And Bart was basically like, what's going on, Dr. Kiltz? Tell me. And they kind of went through a bunch of stuff, but Dr. Kiltz has not made that change officially.
Okay, good. Yeah.
So my understanding is that it's all women that are making these assertions and claims and switching from one to the other. So to address that, the argument for us having this conversation or against us having this conversation or being relevant is, how can we speak to the experience of women who are, pre, peri, and postmenopausal? How do we relate to that? And I can say, number one, I'll just be honest, obviously we can't relate to that. But I can tell you from my experience, 90% of my clientele over the past 10 years have been women over 40. So from a clinical perspective, I have a case study that I published in 2022 of 24 women who followed a keto carnivore diet, did functional fitness training, and improved symptoms of menopause. So I have plenty of experience in practical applied science and clinical work with people who fit that demographic. And I can tell you from my experience, and you guys can tell me if this matches your experience, if you spend the time to figure it out, it can work to improve quality of life, health, physical function, etc.
Yeah. I was just going to say too, the majority of my patients are women, and most of them would be perimenopausal, postmenopausal.
Yeah.
And so I don't see anything different that you have to do for postmenopausal women versus any other stage of life. This is our evolved diet. Postmenopausal lions still eat meat, as it turns out, and so that's going to be the same thing for postmenopausal women. There's still optimal nutrition. There are still specific nutrient requirements that do not go away and do not change just because you're over 40 or over 50. It may be that the percentages of X, Y, and Z that you need are slightly different. It may be that the volume that you need may be slightly different, but there is no difference. You don't all of a sudden need broccoli that doesn't exist in nature just because you're over 50. And from what you were saying, so I mentioned this earlier, but I have 6 patients. I have 6 women in their mid 50s who have come out of menopause by going on a carnivore diet. And I've certainly had, and then that's after being in menopause for 5-6 years, not having their period. And then all of a sudden coming in with postmenstrual bleeding, we're like, and they're worried about this, but it actually fits a sort of a pattern of menstrual, normal menstruation.
Says the same thing. I think he talks about that. That's a consistent theme with his practice, that women consistently get pregnant after being like, wait a second, what the heck is going on?
Well, there's a very simple reason for that.
Yeah.
Insulin suppresses estrogen production in women. Women make testosterone first, and that's converted into estrogen in the ovaries. And insulin blocks that conversion. So you get too much testosterone, not enough estrogen. This is PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is the #1 cause of female-driven infertility. In fertility clinics, when someone comes in and they have PCOS, the treatment is to put them on diabetes medication like metformin, which lowers their blood sugar and lowers their insulin and allows for normal estrogen production and lowers their testosterone level. You can just eliminate carbs. It does the exact same thing. They're now calling PCOS type 4 diabetes because this is insulin resistance of the ovaries. That happens when you're getting on, and all of a sudden your total hormonal production may be dipping a bit. Maybe you're not having enough cholesterol. You can't turn cholesterol into pregnenolone, and that can't turn into your other hormones. And now you're having sort of a global dip in your hormones, and you're blocking testosterone converting into estrogen, and now you're really in trouble and you start going through perimenopause. I have women in their 30s doing that. You put them on a carnivore diet. I literally just had a patient today, and she was 38 years old. Her estrogen was barely registered. It was 88. Below 85 is considered menopause. She had very irregular periods, hadn't had a period in several months. She was overweight. She had signs of PCOS. Her IGF-1 is a marker of her growth hormone, was basically that of a 70-year-old woman, and put her on a ketogenic carnivore diet. back in February, March, something like that. 3 months later, almost to the day, we did her blood work again. And her estrogen, instead of being 88, it was 650. And her periods had returned completely normal. And her growth hormone, her IGF-1, had jumped from 12. Normal optimal range for a 25-year-old woman, just to put that in perspective, is 28 to 38 for the units that our lab uses. And going from 12, it jumped up to 31. So now she's optimal for a 25-year-old woman at 38. Right. I mean, massive recovery. And that is just what insulin does. Insulin also affects growth hormone negatively. It blocks the production and action of growth hormone in both men and women. Mm-hmm. And so this is something that you will just massively see. Growth hormone is sort of called the hormone of youth. It keeps your tissues healing and rebuilding and repairing themselves. It also helps with fat loss. This is, something that people can manipulate. The old school bodybuilders, before they had injectable growth hormone, they would train in such a way. I just interviewed a guy named Dr. Nasiosic, who was in the golden era sort of bodybuilder days. Worked out with like Serge Nubret, for a couple of years, and this is what they did, and this is why they did it. They did high volume, a lot of sets, and they had a very short rest period, because that level of intensity stimulated more growth hormone. And we know this, that you do high level resistance training, it stimulates growth hormone, which helps you lose weight, which helps them get sort of shredded and thin. So from a diet perspective, menopausal women, postmenopausal women, perimenopausal women, 4-year-old girls, they will all benefit from this, because this is just our natural evolved diet. And I don't see any difference between postmenopausal women doing this and premenopausal women doing this. We have, Maggie, the rancher, she's 84 years old, and she's only eaten this way. And she didn't even, she's sort of spoken about this, but she didn't even go into menopause until she was in her 60s, And her mom, who was ketogenic most of her life and carnivore for 20 plus years when she was living with Maggie, she didn't go into menopause until she was 65 either. You know, and so that's what this does. It allows your body to just work the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah, and we got a question.
We
got a question specifically. I'm wondering if you can talk on this, and I'm interrupting to ask this because my girlfriend asked it.
Okay.
So Natalie wants to know what your thoughts are on estrogen dominance on a keto carnivore diet.
I would probably need a bit more context, but don't.
In general, she's just asking about the concept of estrogen dominance, and what have you seen in your practice?
I haven't seen it. I mean, when I have women on ketogenic carnivore diets, I mean, things just normalize. Mm-hmm. And so I don't see an imbalance from that standpoint. Are there people talking about estrogen dominance and things like that? I'm sure there probably are some. I think there's some influencers that talk about that. I don't know what their arguments are. I haven't actually looked at them, because I've just never seen any issues.
Experience thing. So, I'm going to put a little bit of her situation out there. She's already done it. So it's not letting anything out, but she's in perimenopause. She's been dealing with a lot of fluctuations and ups and downs, and trying to figure out how to balance things out. And she's primarily, I'd say she's probably 80% carnivore. But just trying to figure out, what the hormonal balance is and how to regulate that with diet has been her challenge. So she's having some estrogen. It's been high, it's been low, it's not consistent, trying to figure out what the best way to use it is. So I think she's just curious to know if you had any experience with that.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing as we were talking about before. Anytime you're having some sort of issue, just if you're 80% carnivore, just try cutting out that 20% and see what that does for you. Plants have endocrine disruptors that disrupt your normal estrogen balance, and so depending on what you're eating, that can cause issues. everybody sort of will secrete some estrogen in their bile as well. And if you're eating fiber, that will bind to the bile and strip it out, and you'll actually lose that. It won't actually recycle properly. And some people think that, well, that's supposed to be, you're trying to get rid of this. Well, no, bile is actually supposed to be reused and is supposed to come back in and absorb your fat. Also, you get taurine and other sorts of nutrients that are made in the liver and have to get absorbed in the gut. And you lose all that when you eat fiber. So that could be an issue. So yeah, anytime you're having any sort of issue, just try that. Maybe try a couple of months, 3 months of only just meat and water, see if that has any help. The thing is that women at some point will, their ovaries will start to reduce the amount of estrogen that they produce. And so everybody's going to go through that, unfortunately. And so, at a certain point, that is physiological and normal to go through that, that process. And if people want to go on HRT and continue having more youthful hormones, and that, I think that's fine, as long as they're bioidentical with their.
Been part of the discussion. Yeah, that's been part of the discussion. Are we at a point where it makes sense to do that?
Yeah, it could be, but I mean, I think she still has options, right? Because that last 20% can make a quite a significant difference, especially if there are any carbohydrates in there or any plants with endocrine disruptors or fiber even. I mean, those can all disrupt normal hormone production. And if she's sort of getting to the point where her body's just sort of globally making a bit less of these hormones, then that could push her over the edge.
Gotcha.
And at 25, maybe that's not a big deal, but that can sneak up. And so I would certainly try that. The argument for doing HRT and things like that for women is that these hormones go into your nuclei and they latch onto your DNA and they change genetic expression. So when you're 25 and your hormones are different, your genetic expression is different. It turns on and off different genes, and that affects tissue rebuilding, regrowth, repair, and function. And so, if you want to extend that sort of youthful period of genetic expression, then HRT is a really good option for that. Not everybody wants to do that, and a lot of people just feel great without it. Then we sort of got the long end of the stick on this one, because I mean, I've got guys in their 70s and 80s that have the testosterone of a 25-year-old. And so we were a bit lucky on that. Women, unfortunately, it's going to sort of fade after time. Yeah. But I think she's still got options on what she can do if she wants to sort of do this more naturally.
Okay. Hey, JT, what are your thoughts on if you had someone come to you and say, hey, I'm having these problems following a carnivore diet. I'm seeing this impact my quality of life or health or performance or whatever else. How do you approach figuring out what they should do next? Because I think a lot of it is part of where we're at, right? People are maybe stuck, and the easiest, quickest thing that they're hearing right now is just start adding carbs in, everything will go away, right? But I think we've covered fairly well that might not be the best long-term option, right? There may be some other things in between instead of jumping to the extreme. So how do you help people figure out what's the best choice moving forward?
I think a lot of it depends on what it is you're actually doing. And you mentioned it, right? Like, do you know actually what it is that you're eating? Do you know how much you're eating? Do you know, so there's a whole bunch that goes into it. It also depends on what exactly your issues are. Like you said before, it might not necessarily be diet related. Are you overstressed, overworked, underslept? Like, are you hydrated? Like, there's so many things that go into it that are not necessarily diet related. So it's like, there's just so much that goes into it. The other thing is, do you have, like, if we are going off of labs, do you have a full picture of your labs? Oftentimes people just get in, this is what my doctor sent me, and it's cool. You have your glucose, maybe your HbA1c, you have your cholesterol levels, and maybe some electrolytes, right? Maybe some liver and kidney function, maybe. And that's it, right? Because that's the cheap stuff to do, right? You spend, your doctor spends $20, charges your insurance $150. You get these super basic labs, and everybody goes, cool. and then they look at your blood pressure as you're sitting there stressed out in their waiting room, right? Like, so then that's what it is. And you're like, yeah, my labs are fine. I'm like, well, are they actually fine? It's flying around. And so there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. And, you know, you touched on it, Chafee's the insulin thing. Like, so many people downplay the role of insulin. And I'm glad you brought up the PCOS. I had the pleasure of sitting in on Bickman's lecture for the Peterson Academy on the essentials of endocrinology. And again, I talk about Bickman a lot. He has a PhD. He has his lab that he runs for insulin, and he's a metabolic obesity scientist. He's also a graduate level professor at BYU of cell biology, right? Like, that cells are this dude's life. And he did a very, very long segment on the role of insulin and reproductive hormones, male and female, especially like stuff like PCOS. So there's just so much that can go into it. A lot of it's just lifestyle. Like, if you are chronically stressed at work, you chronically undereat, and you don't sleep enough, you're going to have problems. Don't care what your diet is. I don't care if you add carbs in or not. You might feel better, right? Like Chafee mentioned it earlier. Yeah, you've been like in this weird, like, I'm kind of in ketosis, I'm kind of not. I'm at 100 grams, I'm underfueled, and then I add a bunch of carbs and I feel better. Well, shocker. Like, you're giving your body something. Your body's like, oh my gosh, finally. That doesn't necessarily mean it's solving the problem. So there's just so much that goes into it, looking deeper. But there are a lot of people that are like that. And I think you hit it earlier when we were talking. It might not necessarily be just diet related.
Yeah, agree. Awesome. Do you guys have any particular points or things that you've been seeing in this whole conversation that you want to highlight before we kill this?
Well, just don't believe the hype. Carbohydrates are not essential. They do not provide any benefit on top of what you can already make yourself. It does not cause stress to make your own glucose or ketones. That is our natural, normal, physiological metabolic state. That's a normal metabolic state of nearly every animal on Earth. 70% of animals are carnivores. They eat fat and protein. And of the herbivores, most of them eat fiber. And fiber does not break down into glucose. It is broken down because no vertebrate animal can make cellulase and break down fiber. So it's the bacteria in their gut or the microorganisms like protozoa that make cellulase, and they eat that fiber, they eat that glucose, and as a byproduct, they make saturated fat, and then those microbes die off, and they get absorbed as protein and nutrients. So even herbivores, even cows, even gorillas, they eat fiber, but what they absorb is fat and protein. So how are they not in ketosis? They're not running on carbohydrates. They're running on fat as well. We're running on fat. Carnivores are running on fat. So if our metabolism was a carbohydrate metabolism, we'd be one of the few animals on this earth that was true for. And so even other great apes, they don't do that, even though they're herbivorous. Even if they're herbivorous, not all of them are. And so that's really important to understand. And so that doesn't even pass the smell test. And I already talked about how carbs don't match our insulin curves. Is actually that our insulin is designed for protein, that our mouth rots if you eat carbohydrates. Therefore, that cannot be our natural or beneficial diet. But that's what the long-term experimental data sets show on people in ketosis, that it does not elevate your cortisol. It does not damage your thyroid. There are studies showing that you need less thyroid hormone to affect these same metabolic benefits when you're in ketosis, because ketones are a cleaner fuel. You need, quite simply, everyone was hyped about, NMN and NAD plus and all that sort of stuff. You need NAD plus to convert glucose and ketones into acetyl-CoA, so you can go into the citric acid cycle and make ATP. Okay, to make 2 acetyl-CoA from carbs, you need 4 NAD plus molecules. To make 2 acetyl-CoA molecules from ketones, you only need 1. So you need 4 times the NAD plus to make the same amount of ATP from carbohydrates. That's an inefficient fuel, and you're going to run out of that resource of your NAD plus, which causes problems as we go. the other thing is that my patients, I mean, I understand you mentioned that your T3 went down. Mine has not. Mine has not gone down one iota in nearly a decade. And I haven't seen that in my patients either. I promote and I teach a very strict version of this. And so that means no plants that have goitrogens. There's an entire category of plant toxin that causes thyroid dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, hey, look, specifically, you're a thyroid patient. Don't eat these things. You need to be very strict.
Yeah, it sounds like, and this is we get into the maybe virtue signaling a little bit in some of the messaging is, it sounds like all you're saying is just a carnivore harder.
Well,
right? And
no,
that's not going to solve anything. Just doing it. I'm doing it wrong? How could I be doing it wrong?
No, the thing is that there are things on this earth that cause harm. You know, and it's not that you're doing it right or you're doing it wrong. Some people just aren't doing it. You know, if you're eating a lot of meat, that's great. But if you're eating a whole bunch of other stuff, that's not really the same thing. You know, and so people saying, well, you can't do carnivore wrong. Of course you can. You can do anything wrong. You can lift weights wrong. You can hurt yourself. You do the wrong techniques, you can destroy your joints. You can do a math problem wrong. You get to the end result, fine. But what if you don't? That you're doing it wrong, right? You're not following the steps in the process. You're doing a chemical experiment. You follow specific steps in order to run that experiment. You can do that wrong. You can do anything wrong.
I love the math analogy because that's a really good way to describe this. There's obviously, depending on the problem you're trying to solve, there's probably 2 or 3 different ways that someone could approach a logic problem and solve it. One way may be faster, right? It's going to be different if I've memorized multiplication tables and I can look at an equation and go, oh, that's this answer, versus if I have to sit down and count on my fingers or get up some blocks on a table and figure it out. I could figure out what the answer is a bunch of different ways. One way is going to be more efficient. One way is going to be more repeatable. One way is going to get me to the answer faster and more efficiently than other ways. That doesn't mean the other ways are wrong. They still work. The end result was the same. But the end result in the context of performance and efficiency was not the same. So I think that may be part of what we're missing in the discussion is, yes, it is possible to get to a result, but what are the other impacts of how you got there? I think that may be a nuance in the conversation we need to, it's okay to do it however anybody wants to do it. This is my takeaway. This is what I want everyone to come away with is however you decide you want to do it, that's fantastic. Understand why you're doing it. Don't do it because someone else said this is how to do it. Figure out what it is you're trying to do and do your own. We say N equals 1 all the time, and then we offload our decisions to an influencer, right? If it's N equals 1, that means you have to do the work to figure out what's working best for you. And don't just base it off of one thing. Don't just base it off of weight. Don't just base it off of one marker. If you really want to be sustainable in your results, you have to have a broader definition of what quality of life and health means to you. It can't just be one thing. Because that one thing isn't going to be the same in how it affects your life all the time. So that would be my takeaway. I don't care what you do it for you in a way that works best for you and where you're trying to go. And it doesn't have to be extreme. Minimum effective dose means figure out the lowest hanging fruit that you can pick right now, right? What's the one small thing you can do that's going to have the biggest impact in where you're trying to go? That's the change you need to make. You don't have to be, I'm going to go all meat and water for the next 6 months because Dr. JT said that's the way to do it. If you want to, that's great. But it doesn't have to be that. Maybe there's one thing you can do. Maybe you can just stop drinking soda every day. And that's going to be the thing that goes, hey, wait a second, I'm feeling better because of this. What's the next step? Right. Yeah. So there's a process of change. It doesn't have to be extreme. It doesn't have to be overnight. And if you're already doing something, maybe, yes, we need to stop, I think, being afraid of or marginalizing the idea of doing it better for you. If you want to call that carnivoring harder, then call it carnivoring harder. But there are things within the context of how we define carnivore that it's likely you're not doing.
Yeah.
And you could do that differently and see better results. And that's just the fact of the matter. That's not a judgment. I'm not saying anybody's bad or doesn't understand or whatever, but that's just there are ways to do it within the context.
Yeah.
So
and well, and there's, you know, there's more than one ways to skin a cat. And so the thing is too, is it like, you know, what are your goals? You know, for me, it's optimal health. It's me not putting anything in my body that's going to be harmful to it. I mean, that's my end goal, you know. So there's basically one way to do that, you know, and others might be they want to lose some weight. Other people maybe they want to come off their meds or just want to feel generally better, and just moving in that direction. You know, to your point, getting rid of sodas, you know, doing something in an incremental way, getting rid of the junk food, and just going more whole foods. I mean, that's already a huge step in the right direction. You will improve your health that way, and you know, you can just cut out a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, and you will get very serious health benefits. If you are dealing with very serious health issues and that's not quite enough, then okay, we'll just keep going, you know, and understand that this can be used to affect some very, very serious changes. We have thousands of randomized controlled trials in humans showing the benefits of ketogenic diets for specific medical outcomes with distinct and discrete endpoints in these studies. So, and even compared against DASH diet for weight loss, high carb, low fat diets, Mediterranean diets, all these sorts of things for Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, weight loss, diabetes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It beats all of them. Carnivore diet is a ketogenic diet. So, you know, this is a tool that people have, and they can use this as much or as little as they want to. You know, for me, when people say, well, this didn't work for me and that didn't work for me, I always wonder why. I always ask why. And because the principles are there, that this is our evolved biologically appropriate diet. This is what humans have been eating since humans have been humans. And so why that, you know, to me, that's just like, okay, there has to be something that we can find there to fix. And when I'm working with my patients, I've run into these sorts of things. Okay, why isn't this working exactly the same as it does for other people? What are we missing? What are we going? I assume that there is something there that we can find. So I don't take no for an answer. I don't stop and go like, wow, I guess it just didn't work for you. See ya. No, I was like, okay, what are you eating? What are you doing? What is this happening? We spend hours sometimes trying to figure this out. And so far, we have found it every single time with my patients, and we've been able to figure out what's going on. So that's why I'm so confident that there's probably something that we can figure out here, that someone's saying, hey, I'm having this problem. I bet you we can figure it out.
Without adding carbs.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely without adding carbs. Yeah. And rotting your teeth.
No, I got to get going. I got a kid's soccer game I got it ready for.
Okay. All right. Do you have anything you want to add real quick? Or
no, I just think, if people have been having success, obviously keep doing it. There's no, from a physiological standpoint, there's no need to have to add back carbs in, right? You might be able to do fine with adding back carbs in. That's fine. But people get this idea that they're like, oh, well, I have to, right? Because if I don't have carbs for this long, I'm going to have this host of problems, which is just untrue. So, yeah, you know, like I said, do what works for you. Just because you do carnivore and you have success on carnivore doesn't mean you have to do carnivore for the rest of your life. You don't have to do it super strict for the rest of your life. You just have to take the steps that are going to help you with where you're at. And like you said, don't do what I do, right? You got to do what you do, because we're in different places health-wise. Take the information, apply it to yourself, try to get healthy. That's really the bottom line, right?
Awesome. Cool. Again, thanks guys for doing this. It was super short notice, last minute kind of thing. Hope this was helpful for everybody, and we'll catch you guys later.
Yeah. Thanks everybody. And good to see you guys. And hopefully that was helpful. See you all later. Okay. Take care, everyone.
Download this video.